Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today for what promises to be an extremely interesting conversation. At least it's very interesting for me. And the reason why it is interesting, one, the panelists. Just look at this wonderful group of people that took the time to talk to us about a very important topic today. We live in a changing world, and we live in an explosive Middle East. Our Middle East region and MENA region have been going through changes for a long, long time, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, and we witness. As journalists, we witness. As business people, we witness. As diplomats, as regular citizens, we witness. And a lot of times, we don't have a choice. We can't change anything. So we just witness, we watch, we might have opinions. Most of the time, as ordinary people, we don't have an outlet. We can't tell people how we feel, what we think. So I always like to take the chance of a panel to really have an exchange, to share ideas. So we don't want this panel to be a one-way street. We don't want to be sitting here talking to you about what we think or what we do or our opinions. I think you've had enough of that. So I want to invite you from the onset to please participate. If you have any question for one panelist or for all panelists, please feel free to let me know. We might not be able to go around and get all the questions, but at least let's try to make it an interactive exchange. Because as I promise you, we have a wonderful group of specialists here. If you look at your program, the program says that we are going to be talking about Turkey and the Gulf countries. And the real title is The New Leaders. And you can see that there is a question mark at the end of the statement. So are Turkey and the Gulf countries the new leaders? Whatever you think about that, each and every member of our panelists here, and every one of them have an opinion that I personally would like to hear. So I'm going to do my best to get that out of them and have a conversation. Are these countries the new leaders? And if so, how do they lead? And if so, with leadership comes responsibility. And are they ready for that responsibility? So feel free to participate with us. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists very briefly and then get them started with one question so that you can hear them, so you can know where each and every one of them is coming from and then get this panel started. Right to my left is Qadir Abdelrahim. He's the editor-in-chief of the Huffington Maghreb, and he hails from Algeria. And I'm really glad to have Algeria on the panel for very personal reasons. I'm a big fan of media in Algeria, and I do think that Algeria has gone through changes, and it continues to go through changes. And I like that we have media people on this panel, not just diplomats, because I like to talk about that dance between media and diplomacy, the media and politics, and see the role of each and every one of them in this process. Welcome, Qadir. Next to Qadir is Mehmet Ogutu. He is currently the chairman of Global Resources Partnership based in the UK. He's a former diplomat. He's an expert on energy, infrastructure, and he's someone who comes from Turkey. And Turkey is definitely becoming a major player in the region, more so than before. And this is something that we are looking forward to discussing here today. And next to Mehmet is another Turk, Ms. Özlem Piltangolu. And she is a former member of the Turkish parliament. So great representation of women in Turkey and women's participation in politics. So again, more topics to discuss on this panel and more focus that is much, much needed. Then next to her is Muwaffaq Harb. I always like to think of Muwaffaq as the journalist that can totally bridge the East and the West. Just to put things in perspective for you, when the US decided to win the hearts and minds of the Arab world, they tasked Muwaffaq to run the venture that they named at the time, and it's still named Al-Hurra TV. So that gives you an idea of the importance of his role in really bridging the US to the rest of the world, especially the Arab world, that is very, very key to the US. So in this case, I think this perspective is very much needed, because as Turkey and as the Gulf countries see themselves playing a new role or a major role in the region, it's important to see how the West sees that, how the other Arab countries, such as another thing about Muwaffaq is that he comes from Lebanon. So Lebanon and Algeria here, looking in at this change, I would love to hear how you see it and if you see the change coming and how it's coming along. And finally, we have Abdullah Al Khalifa. Abdullah hails from Bahrain, of course, a very important Gulf country that is going through its own challenges. He is a political advisor, which makes you a key person on this panel because, of course, as I said in the beginning, when we talk about leadership, we talk about responsibility. So it's good to look at one Gulf country that is going through challenges of both leadership and responsibility in getting a taste and a sense of how things are. So now that you know the panelists, I'm going to start with one question and give each one of them the chance to answer it so you can see where they're coming from. If you have any questions, please let us know early. Otherwise, we will be on our way for a great discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about, as the title says, the new leaders with a big question mark. I want each and every one of you to tell me your perspective as I introduced you from that perspective. Tell me if you think that these are the new leaders, and are they ready? How do you see things from your perspective, from your country's perspective, from the citizens of your country's perspective? It doesn't matter if you're a politician, it doesn't matter if you're a former politician, just give us your sense. This is about your opinion. And let's start right here and move along.
Thank you. I'm going to talk in French. I'm feeling more comfortable with that. Quand on parle de nouveaux leaders à propos de la Turquie et des pays du Golfe, et qu'on se place du point de vue des pays du Maghreb, et particulièrement de l'Algérie, puisque c'est le rôle que l'on m'a demandé de tenir, c'est évidemment une vision assez différente que l'on peut avoir pour des raisons historiques, notamment s'agissant de l'Algérie, puisqu'il y a une présence turque très, très ancienne et importante, même si elle a été essentiellement limitée à la côte. Mais malgré tout, elle a existé et dans l'histoire, ça reste dans la mémoire collective quelque chose qui est très présent pour les Algériens. S'agissant des pays du Golfe, évidemment, c'est une toute autre affaire parce que les relations historiques sont beaucoup plus récentes, sont des pays plus récents et qui ont moins de profondeur historique. Et je crois que c'est peut-être là, dans l'histoire, que l'on peut expliquer les raisons pour lesquelles, aujourd'hui, on voit de nouvelles perspectives se dessiner dans cette région du monde. Il me semble que depuis une dizaine d'années, la raison principale qui fait que les pays du Maghreb, et encore une fois singulièrement l'Algérie, ont un regard un peu différent, c'est l'irruption du Qatar, notamment en France, puisque pour nous le Maghreb, c'est la France qui est une sorte d'interlocuteur privilégié, et l'influence que joue le Qatar en France, alors que c'était un terrain de jeu privilégié pour les pays du Maghreb. Donc il y a un pays qui a des moyens extrêmement importants, financiers, et qui met au service de sa diplomatie une politique d'influence nouvelle qui ne vient pas contester la tradition et la relation bilatérale entre le Maghreb et la France, mais qui est un acteur nouveau. Donc je crois que ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui ce regard, encore une fois, entre les pays du Maghreb, ou l'Algérie, le Maghreb et les pays du Golfe est nouveau, pèse et vient essentiellement de cette grande nouveauté diplomatique qui est vraiment très récente, puisque la stratégie, la diplomatie nouvelle qui a été impulsée après le coup d'État du milieu des années 90 au Qatar, est une vision sur le long terme. S'agissant des relations avec la Turquie, évidemment, les choses sont très différentes. On voit, notamment depuis que l'AKP est aux affaires en Turquie, on verra, peut-être qu'on aura l'occasion d'en parler, lorsqu'il y aura une alternance, si les choses se prolongent. Mais depuis que l'AKP est aux affaires en Turquie, la relation avec les pays du Maghreb, singulièrement l'Algérie, s'est considérablement renforcée. Il y a une volonté de la part de la Turquie de reprendre pied et de retrouver sa place dans une région qu'elle avait peut-être pas abandonnée, mais délaissée, pour se recentrer sur ses préoccupations internes. La Turquie est un bon exemple de ce que on appelle dans certains pays du Maghreb une perspective politique réaliste. C'est un pays musulman sans être un pays arabe. C'est un pays qui a une histoire sur laquelle je ne vais pas revenir, une profondeur historique et culturelle très importante, qui a été un des grands pays qui a joué un rôle très important pendant des siècles, et puis qui s'est effondré après la Première Guerre mondiale, avec son alliance avec l'Allemagne et la défaite de celle-ci. Et aujourd'hui, il y a une sorte de fantasme, notamment en Algérie de la part de certains dirigeants, qui consiste à imaginer que notre regard doit se désaxer et doit être moins tourné vers l'Europe ou la France que vers la Turquie. Ce n'est pas inintéressant, mais ça suppose évidemment que des pays comme l'Algérie notamment consentent à faire des efforts d'abord considérables, notamment en termes de réforme politique. Parce que c'est quand même là-dessus que tout pèse. Si on n'arrive pas à construire et à modifier, à réformer le système politique, rien n'est possible. Et pour le moment, on n'est pas du tout dans cette logique-là. Donc, encore une fois, je vais être très, très bref. La relation entre Turquie, pays du Golfe, Algérie, Maghreb est très différente pour des raisons historiques, comme je l'ai souligné. Je crois que, pour ce qui me concerne, on apprend plus de l'histoire que de la géographie, même si la géographie, ça compte. Et encore plus dans une région qui a été très souvent malmenée par l'histoire et qui a aujourd'hui beaucoup de mal à assumer son histoire, qu'elle soit coloniale ou post-coloniale, ce qui n'est pas le cas notamment de la Turquie, qui de ce point de vue-là peut être, sinon un exemple, peut être un modèle. Merci.
All right, thank you very much. Mohammed.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the invitation. That's the second time coming to Tangiers after 20 years of absence. I believe that you can't talk about leadership in isolation from the environment in which leadership grows and flourishes. Therefore, I'd like to say a few words on where we are heading for in terms of global system, so that we can better understand where MENA Gulf countries are and how Turkey could be related to that in terms of leadership. And no longer traditional industries, traditional players, traditional rules of the game prevail. Things have changed significantly over the past 2 decades. And BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and will be controlling the commanding highs of the world economy in the next decade or so, if you are to believe the Goldman Sachs projections. Total GDP, combined GDP of BRICS nations will be more than G7 countries. So there is a significant economic power shift from west to the east, not only in economy but also in finance. Today it's no longer London, New York and Frankfurt providing the bulk of finance for investment. It is Hong Kong, Singapore, Moscow, Shanghai, and the real dynamics of international finance. Add to this the Islamic finance. More than $7 trillion worth of Islamic finance. Sovereign wealth funds, again from the Gulf, from Asia coming. So this is changing, dynamizing the context in which we are living. Also geopolitically, we see that US influence is going to recede over the time. Still, it is a superpower, but we are talking about China-US tandem in the world, no longer unipolar system. And where the place of European Union, Japan and others will be is still under discussion. So we are living through historic times. In this power shift, this not only economically, geopolitically, financially, technologically, but also in terms of values. No longer we are talking about Adam Smith. No longer we talk about Winston Churchill and Roosevelt. So there's so much talk about Deng Xiaoping, Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, Malaysia's former leaders, Mahathir Mohammed, and also leaders in the Gulf and Middle East. So this is really historic time. And when we talk about Turkey, and you have to see this in this context as well, Turkey in the past missed the trains so many times, including after the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was a euphoria that Turkey, from Adriatic to the Great Wall of China, wielding influence. This hasn't happened. In this new era, we luckily had a very strong government and leadership, which captured and harnessed all the opportunities presented and dealt with the challenges. Now we have a government in power more than a decade, quite stable politically, although it has problems, which we will discuss, of course. But thanks to this government and the leadership qualities of this government, Turkey repositioned itself. It's no longer a loyal ally of NATO. It's no longer a nation begging for membership in the European Union. So it has diversified its portfolio, relationship. This is also reflected in its trade relationship. More than 60% of Turkish trade was European Union countries. Now it's only 40%. With Middle East and Gulf nations, the volume of trade in Turkey's total trade was less than 6%. Today it's about 18%. And it's going further, up and up. And by any objective criteria, if you look at the indicators, Turkey is a regional power to reckon with, between China, Russia, and Germany. Its GDP size is close to $1 trillion. The nearest country to Turkey is Saudi Arabia and Russia. And in terms of military power, hard power, it has the second largest army in NATO after the United States. So you can go on like this. In terms of agricultural output, $63 billion, it is the largest in Europe. And in terms of economy, seventh largest economy in the world, in Europe, and 16 in the world. So by looking at any objective criteria, Turkey is already a regional power to reckon with. But leadership is a different thing. I don't think that leadership should be so much highlighted and overrated, because this is a concept which attracts reaction and harshness. More important, I think, is the partnerships and cooperation than leadership. And this is what I think Turkey has tried to do with this region that we are talking about. And there has been some setbacks, which we will discuss. But let me stop here, perhaps.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. Özlem, your perspective.
First of all, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here and invited by Amadeus Institute. As other panelists already expressed, that the world has been evolving from polar world to multipolar world. So there is no superpower exists to protect the world and give an answers to the security issues. And I can say that last 3-4 years has been a very intensive years, which indicates that. And this security concerns actually drive regional states such as Gulf states and Turkey to seek answers to their security concerns, and it actually drives them to find and to seek for new partnership in the region and for the security concerns. In this room, everybody may know, but I would like to emphasize once more what actually we're talking about when we say region, security, and security concerns. And let me just give you some just brief figures about it. According to some studies that estimates Gulf states, Gulf Cooperation Council states alone has 20% of the world oil reserve versus 9% Iran and 7% Iraq. And when it comes to world gas reserves, GCC controls more than, again, 20% of the reserves. So, and if we look to population, that we'll see that 0.6% of the world population, which makes around 36 million people, do live in this region with the high above living standards. But the surrounding of the region is more than 30% of the world population, which makes around 1.6 billion people are living under the living conditions and the standards. So it means that we're faced with actually a very few big wealth in a very few hands, surrounded by big poverty problems. So that's what we're talking about, Gulf. But Turkey, as a newcomer to the region, has 76 million population with median age is 29. And IMF statistics estimates that Turkey's GDP is around $815 billion. And it is the 15th largest economy in the world and 6th in Europe. Also, it is the largest army in Europe and the second largest army in NATO. Besides the NATO membership, it is one of the founder of the Council of Europe, which can give us as a clue of the actual connection with Europe, and also candidate member to European Union and a member of Islamic Conference Organization. Of course, Turkey had been long absent in the Gulf. If we just briefly look at the history, that we'll see that after the Ottoman power was dismantled during the First World War, Turkey has just cut all her ties with the region until 1966, when the first high actually official visit took place between Turkey and Gulf states, Saudi Arabia. Till the AK Party, Justice and Development Party, we see that this relation is evolving, and it evolved to trade and economic-based relation. But I want to continue for the second round.
That's wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Muwaffaq.
Thank you, Octavia. This is my third panel, and I just came from the early morning session, so if you see me without a lot of energy now, you know why. I will try to recharge. I will make my remarks brief because I am sure your questions would enrich this discussion. Try to be provocative. Those who are cynical about the Arab Spring would say to you, the last time Arabs revolted in such a magnitude was in 1916 against the Ottoman Empire. Almost 100 years later, Arabs are revolting, and they're hoping to bring back the Ottoman Empire. So that's why people would say, what are you looking for? The early days of the revolution in Syria, in the north of Syria, people started raising the Ottoman Empire flag. So I'm going to talk about how Arabs, mainly in the Gulf, because this is the subject of this session, viewed Turkey evolving role in the Middle East before the eruption of Arab protests, and then after that. When the US toppled the regime of Saddam Hussein, Egypt is crippled with economic problems and internal political issues. The Arab world suffered from leadership And to some extent, we started hearing people saying you only have 3 main countries in the Middle East: Israel, Iran, and Turkey. No one was talking about an Arab leadership. The Arab League is ineffective. The GCC countries, you know, they had split among themselves, and the most they could do is issue a final communique denouncing Iran for occupying the islands and supporting the Palestinians. And so there was a lack of leadership. So Arab masses were happy to see that Turkey is willing to play a more assertive role. And what helped Turkey at the time, it has an Islamist leadership. And you know, political Islam in the Arab world is a major player. So they viewed in the new Turkish leadership as something they can aspire to have. And at the same time, the Turkish government took a more assertive role in the Arab-Israeli conflict. And as most of you would remember, the rift between Turkey and Israel. So before the Prime Minister Erdogan, you had a good relationship between Israel and Turkey, and all of a sudden, relationship had been severed, and Arab masses started to welcome more Turkey into the region. However, after the Arab Spring and after the changes that swept the Arab world, Arab leaders and Arab governments started to be suspicious of Turkish foreign policy. I know that Turkish, and I'm sure our team panel mates here mentioned, you know, when they talk about the Arab world, they look at it as markets and energy and having good trade relationship. But in reality, if you look at it right now, the trade deficit between Turkey and the rest of the Arab world. Turks export to the Arab world, but they don't import a lot of stuff from the Arab world. The Arabs don't have anything to send to Turkey, but these are reality. They look at the Arab world as a place where they can go and not invest, but where they can help in the oil and the energy sector. But the Arab world has not seen yet or reaped yet the benefits of a more assertive Turkish role in the Arab world. In addition, today, what at the beginning people were talking about the Turkish model. People were so happy, even in the West, people started to talk about the Turkish model, whereby you could have an Islamist government and the country has some sort of a democracy. But even that, in the Egyptian model, when people said the Egyptian model under Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, they have the chance to become like Turkey. It didn't work. So the Turkish model that a lot of people rejoiced that might work in the Arab world also did not work, and Arab governments started to be suspicious of the evolving Turkish leadership. Even now, if you travel to the Gulf and you talk to Gulf leaders, at the beginning we're so happy to see Turkey playing a role to counter the Iranian influence in the region. But right now, given what happened in Tunisia, in supporting Hamas and supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, there is a rift right now that exists between Turkey and the Gulf region. So with these remarks, you know, I would like to conclude, and hopefully I can get some questions, and I would be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Muwaffaq. Abdullah.
Thank you, Octavia. It's a pleasure to be back in Panja. I thank Majesté Institute for the invitation and for putting this tremendous forum all together. I'll start off by saying that the Gulf-Turkish relations has gained its momentum since the beginning of the millennium. It was recognized by a visual expression in September 2008 when the Gulf states and Turkey has started their strategic dialogue and starting to working together in the region as strategic partners. As we see, the Gulf states and Turkey has expressed on several occasions their desire for creating an area of peace and prosperity in the region. The Gulf states and Turkey both share similar principles towards regional issues, respect for international law, non-intervention, dialogue, diplomacy. And this partnership, I would view it as a threefold strategic partnership: a political, a security, and an economic partnership. On the political front, I would say both the Gulf states and Turkey share similar positions towards almost all of the regional issues. They share the same position towards the crisis in Syria, for ending the suffering of the Syrian people, same position towards the Iraqi issue and the stability of Iraq, the transition in Yemen, the ending the isolation of the Turkish population in Cyprus, to name but a few. Some might argue and say, yes, but they have opposing stands towards the developments in Egypt. That is correct, but I view it as a subtle difference in policy, which is just so short-term and minor in its effect in this partnership. Secondly, the economic partnership. Obviously, throughout the last decade, it was very apparent that the economic cooperation between the Gulf states and Turkey has shaped tremendously the development of this relationship. Many agreements has been signed in the fields of trade and investment. Bilateral business councils has been established throughout the years. Trade has increased tremendously, even though FTA negotiations has been initiated in 2005, and yes, they were stalled in 2010. But if we look at the numbers and statistics, we would find that in 2002, for example, the global trade volume of Turkey with the Gulf states as a whole was $1.49 billion, which is equal to 1.7% of the global trade. 10 years later, it reached to 19.6 billion, which is equal to 5% of Turkish global trade. And as we know, the Turkish government is looking to increase that number to $100 billion by 2023. And obviously, with the Eurozone crisis, the markets of the Middle East and the Gulf in particular could be an appealing alternative for Turkey. Food security, obviously, is a significant component of this relationship. It serves the development of this sector. Agriculture, obviously, as we know, accumulated to around 9% of the GDP. Moving on to the security, obviously, it stems from the joint vision of the Gulf states and Turkey for a stable and secure Middle East and the Gulf. Obviously, the Gulf states has supported NATO's Istanbul initiative, and I truly do believe that this strategic partnership could form the new leaders of the region. Back to you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I hope you did get the idea, the picture of where everyone is coming from. I think we have a very diverse group, lots of great points that were raised. Before we jump in and start talking about the real issues, I'd like to give you the opportunity to answer. I know that I saw the reactions as some of the panelists were saying things that, you know, there are things that would require an answer, and I would welcome that. I think the main point that I would love to focus on today is something that you all mentioned. You know, everybody is talking about Turkey's role. And I really don't want this to become a panel about Turkey. We really want to focus about Turkey and the Gulf countries that are playing leadership roles nowadays. But the point is, Turkey has been sort of watching and playing the role of everybody's friend by not interfering, you know, and that is part of the policy. We were talking about that earlier, you know, Prime Minister Erdogan's policy, you know, zero problems with neighbors, right? And the thing is, what happened is, as soon as Turkey started getting involved, the problems began. Because that's what happens when you engage, right? I mean, you can just sit on the sidelines and do nothing, and yeah, nothing happens. But when you start engaging, problems may occur. And of course, we're talking about a region that is so divided. I think we heard so much about, even GCC countries. There is no GCC anymore because the Gulf countries do not agree on everything all the time. And how can Turkey satisfy everyone? Of course, it can't. And the joke now in Turkey is that from 0 problems with neighbors to many problems with all neighbors. So now, I personally think this is a good thing because it makes people think and reassess their position. And this is where I want us to think about what is good about this engagement. Where do we go from here? But one thing, for Muwaffaq, when you said about some Arabs wanting the Ottoman Empire back, I don't think Ataturk will be too happy with that. I think at least they want a modern Turkey to be more involved in the region. And although some would like the empire to be back, I agree with you. And I think this is where we need to draw the line and keep the conversation, focused on the real problems. So who wants to answer some of the... go ahead, Mehmet, you can start.
Well, I think the first point I'd like to make is that it is misleading to put all the Arab countries in the same basket. Yeah. We don't have an Arab world. Yes, the concept exists, you have Arab League, whatever, but there isn't an Arab world in the sense that we talk about. From Yemen to Algeria, from Qatar to Saudi Arabia, Syria. It's a totally heterogeneous grouping. I think that's the first point to make. And second point, whether Arab world benefited from Turkey or not, I think it's too early to judge. It's only a couple of years down we are talking about. I think both Turkey and the Arab world have learned lessons from the way they engage, excessive euphoria, optimism, now living its place to a more foot-down assessment of where we are and how we can work together. But already there has been some benefits, of course. I might highlight 1 or 2 of them. And first of all, I don't think it's correct also to talk about a Turkish model. What might happen is that some countries in the region might be inspired by what Turkey is doing. Because we are talking about 2 different, again, models and systems. Turkey has managed to accommodate its Islamist movements in the legitimate system. So from 1960s onwards, we had the Islamist parties represented in parliament and also governing the municipalities. Prime Minister himself was the mayor of Istanbul. So they have been grown within the system. They have become a legitimate, indispensable part of the system. And also, economically speaking, 1980 reforms in Turkey, I think, were the main stay of how our economy started to open up and develop. At that time, I was an advisor to Prime Minister Özal, so we worked very hard. We completely changed Turkey's dynamics in terms of economic outlook. So Arab world, of course, has if still we call it in quotation marks Arab world, has a long way to go in terms of political freedoms, entrepreneurship, and giving more rights and initiatives to private entrepreneurs. Still is state-dominated in many ways. And so economic reforms, political reforms, it will take long years. But Turkey also, one of the reasons why there was such a welcome from the Middle East and Gulf for Turkey's increased, enhanced engagement in the region, again, the political juncture in the international arena. Iran growing as a very strong power and creating what's called the Shia arc from Iran to Iraq, Syria, Hezbollah, and also even the eastern provinces of Saudi Arabia, minorities in Kuwait, Bahrain. So it was emerging as a serious threat. And Turkey, as such a powerful military, economic country, could be one of the counterbalancing forces. That was a main strategic benefit that Gulf nations especially thought they will derive from Turkey. Also, economic diversification agenda in the region, because these are, especially the Gulf nations, heavily dependent on hydrocarbon exports. They need to diversify their economies. So Turkish entrepreneurship, investment, because we shouldn't exaggerate also the level of trade and investment between Turkey and this region. It's still a minuscule in the overall context of Turkey's economy. So in Turkey's exports as well as investment, the share is still quite small compared to other places. And last but not least, I think if there is an opportunity, I'll be very happy to talk about food, water, and energy nexus that is becoming so important.
Absolutely.
That will also be perhaps the next battleground in the region where Turkey has a lot to offer. But my final word on this subject is that let's not jump into conclusion. It's too early. Both sides made mistakes. They learned from them, and they are reconsidering, resetting the relationship as necessary. Unless it is mutually beneficial, unless it is win-win, unless it is not threatening or interventionist, it will not work. Both sides know that. So I think the next stage will be to develop these relationships, cultivate along these lines. Thank you.
All right, Özlem, and then Muwaffaq also wants to answer.
Thank you. Of course, to understand the new era, actually we should look what was in the past and what is now going on. So the relations, I suppose, is started differentiated with the Arab Spring itself. Before that, the relation, we can say that was economic-based, trade-based, economic-oriented, and as already Mr. Khalifa has expressed that in 2007, GCC countries, foreign ministers, they declared Turkey as the outside region, as a strategic partner for the first time in Jeddah. And at that time, Turkey had a very good relations with Iran and Syria also. Even Iran's nuclear efforts were perceived by a very big threat by the GCC countries. These relations, I mean Iran and Turkey relations, were welcomed because it is thought at that time that these kinds of relations of Turkey could actually balance the assertiveness of Iran's policy. But the Arab Spring itself had changed so many things. It has brought significant change in the GCC countries itself, and that is perceived as a kind of crisis since the Iranian Revolution took place in the early 1980s. And what I saw is that two different reactions came out from the Arab GCC countries. One is internally to balance, to repress on the one hand, and at the same time try to give additional economic incentives. For example, in Saudi Arabia, $130 billion just spent for the additional civil servant salaries. Or in Kuwait, 115% salaries are just raised up. But the second one is to shore up regional partnerships. Of course, we cannot talk about one single Arab world. If you also consider that last 50 or 60 years, at least twice times Arabs come to war and war each other. So how could we talk about single Arab unity? No, there isn't. But this Arab Spring movements and uprisings and the security concerns actually I believe that make GCC countries to think about once again to in some certain areas, in some certain policies to unify. So I believe that this is the area of GCC. Before it was so fractious and very divergent places like Arab League, but now GCC is a good opportunity to handle these crises.
I'm going to ask Abdullah to weigh in on this after Muwaffaq's comment.
Okay, thanks, Octavia. Okay, now it's fine. I think the slogan of zero problem with the neighbors is a myth, because how could you have a zero problems with your neighbors when your neighbors are filled with problems? This is just an illusion. And I believe for Turkey to have a good relationship with the GCC countries, it cannot view and pursue a policy in isolation from its neighbors. Turkey has borders with Syria, Iran, and Iraq, and they have problems with all three of them. So you cannot ignore geographic realities and go where the money is, where the GCC is. To some extent, in my view, I think today what happened in the Arab world, the Turkish government has to be reminded that when you take sides or when you support one movement, whether right or wrong, whether it's a good cause or not, when change happens in that government, you inherit the problem and animosity. And this is exactly what's happening in Libya, Tunisia, and in Egypt to some extent. You cannot ignore that today relationship between Egypt and Turkey are at their worst. So I'm sure there are a lot of revisions going on inside Turkey right now, how to adapt to the new realities. And for the sake of provoking a good discussion, I believe the role of Turkey in the Arab world is a bit exaggerated. Arabs were thirsty to have leadership and to counter Iran, like the gentleman said. And at the same time, the Turks, I believe, are claiming a bigger role than they can chew. Thanks.
I'm glad you brought up the Iranian angle, because, now that we're going to hear your perspective. I mean, we heard a lot about, GCC is not the same anymore, and GCC is not united, and of course there are many things that divide GCC countries, especially politically. And of course, the positions that GCC countries have, towards Turkey or Turkey's involvement, the Iranian role, the Shiite spread, all that. I mean, we have many opinions that people will disagree on before they agree on the other topics. What is your perspective? How did you feel listening to all these points of views about your country and your region in relationship to leading this region and playing a role in leading the region? Do you agree, number one? Do you disagree? Because, your point of view was interesting, because you sort of talked about one Gulf region or one group of Gulf countries. You really did not separate. And I think the panel is definitely separating.
Well, I think Turkey is indeed starting to promote itself as an important regional player in the region. It's evident through its involvement in several regional issues, mainly nowadays, obviously, the crisis in Syria. I would have to say that this crisis has brought the Gulf states and Turkey closer together. If the Assad regime will fall sooner or later, Turkey would have to step in and fill a very big gap. And I believe that it will be difficult for Turkey to do so without the cooperation and the support of the Gulf states. We've seen during the past decade that Turkey had several initiatives for a couple of, let's say, controversial issues, the main of which was...
Abdullah, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, because I really want you to talk about the Gulf countries, not Turkey. I think we've covered enough the Turkish angle, and I really want you to speak about the Gulf region itself and the Gulf countries, and that point of view that, is there a GCC? Is there a one unified point of view on the issues, from Syria to Egypt to Bahrain? Bahrain is also going through major challenges with its Shiite population. Let's talk about it openly and say, is there a one unified view, or are the Gulf countries also divided? And to Muwaffaq's point, I mean, if Turkey gets involved in Syria, yes, it might gain some support within some Gulf countries, but it also will gain enemies in other quarters as well. It's not going to be easy. Taking one side, bringing down the Assad regime might be applauded by a group, but it's not going to be applauded by others, and it's going to make Turkey the enemy elsewhere. So let's be clear about what we're talking about. And I want you to focus on the Gulf region, if you can, please.
Well, talking about the Gulf region, starting from the development of the GCC in 1982, obviously it was developed initially because of the threat of the export of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Following the first Gulf War between Iraq and Iran, obviously, that went on for 8 years. The main cooperation between the 6 Gulf states was to develop and establish a joint military defense force, which was obviously the Peninsula Shield. Since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the borders of Iran are no longer the Arabian Gulf from the west and the Indian Ocean from the south. It extends from the shores of Pakistan on the east to the shores of Lebanon and the Mediterranean. If we look into the region, what's happening in the Gulf? Yes, some are saying, on the one hand, we're talking about a unified vision of the GCC, and on the other hand, we are looking into some opposing and contradicting foreign policies of some Gulf states. Are the Gulf states all in collaboration in some of these stands? No. But again, every member state has its own views, its own foreign policies. Yes, it might be contradicting sometimes. However, the foreign ministers of the Gulf states try very hardly to coordinate, to cooperate. And this was evident in the developments in Egypt, for example. It was evident in the developments in Yemen, resolving the transition, in Iraq, for example, and back again in Syria. So I see it developing, yes, towards the cooperation with Turkey back again. And that's all.
That's good, and thank you very much for this perspective. I think it's very important. I like your description of Iran's borders. I think this is the best description of the Shiite spread that I've ever heard. So I applaud you for that. Thank you. That should give us good food for thought. I want to hear from Qadir for a second. You've been too quiet. You started out saying that history is sometimes more important than geography. And then Muwafaq said that geography is extremely important in the case of Turkey, for example. I like, he's Lebanese, you're Algerian. I like that. I like that we have different views on things. And I think both of you are correct in the context that you were talking about. But seriously, how do you see things now? And I really want the journalist out of you to analyze what we're seeing. And I'm asking you this question because I'm leading to our next topic. So after Qadir answers, I want the audience to let us know if you have any questions. Okay, so start thinking about your questions if you want to ask questions. But Qadir, the question, what I want you to do is look at it in this way. You said history is extremely important, and you talked about Turkish role in the region, and you also talked about the importance of the Gulf countries and Turkey in Algeria and the Maghreb. What I want you to do is look at it in a different way now, after you've heard all the comments, and tell me how do you see that outreach? Does it look right to you now that you've heard all the other opinions? Is it just as innocent as just playing a role, or are there interests at play here, economic interest, maybe energy, maybe otherwise business interests? Is it as innocent as we're just reaching out, we're helping out, we want to play leaders as in to support you, or is it more than that? And how do you see it from your perspective?
Merci. Pour dire les choses très simplement, ma conviction, c'est que le Maghreb n'est pas dans la mondialisation. On n'est pas dans le train, on est sur le quai. Et donc je crois... il suffit de regarder la répartition des rôles que se sont assignés chacun des États. On voit qu'un pays comme le Maroc a des relations privilégiées avec la plupart des pétromonarchies du Golfe, notamment avec les familles régnantes. un pays comme l'Algérie ne joue pas de rôle. Évidemment, c'est un pays important parce qu'il a cette puissance grâce au pétrole et au gaz. Ça donne une surface financière qui lui permet diplomatiquement de continuer à, de temps en temps, jouer un rôle sur certains dossiers qui l'intéressent au premier chef. Après, encore une fois, quand je dis que l'histoire est plus importante pour moi que la géographie, c'est que nous, notamment pays du Maghreb, mais je vais me concentrer sur l'Algérie, je ne vais pas faire pas trop m'étendre notamment sur le Maroc, c'est que l'histoire de l'Algérie n'a jamais été écrite par les Algériens. Et quand ils ont eu l'occasion de le faire, ils ne l'ont pas fait, ils l'ont maquillé ou rendu tellement illisible pour les Algériens que c'est devenu juste un mythe et non pas des faits. Donc, encore une fois, il y a ce vieux concept qui a été décrit par les historiens au XIXe siècle, qui est que l'histoire est toujours écrite par les vaincus. En l'occurrence, on n'a pas considéré à l'indépendance en Algérie que le vainqueur dans la guerre d'indépendance contre la France étaient les Algériens, mais un groupe de personnes, notamment du FLN, qui ont écrit l'histoire à leur bénéfice. Donc on n'a pas cherché à construire un État, mais à bâtir un système qui perdure aujourd'hui encore, grâce notamment à l'argent du pétrole. Je termine ma parenthèse pour dire que un autre pays comme la Tunisie, un petit pays, 10 millions d'habitants, c'est grand comme la Belgique, la Tunisie, n'avait pas au départ beaucoup d'atouts. Et instinctivement, intuitivement, Bourguiba comprend qu'il ne faut pas chercher à jouer un rôle diplomatique quand on n'a pas cette surface géographique et qu'on n'a pas historiquement gagné des galons sur le terrain militaire. Et donc, deux piliers ont permis à la Tunisie de construire son indépendance. C'est un système éducatif très performant à partir de 1956, qu'il n'est plus aujourd'hui, et deux, investir dans le secteur tertiaire qui a fait pendant très longtemps le succès de la Tunisie. Aujourd'hui, ce n'est plus le cas. Donc la perspective est très différente. Mon sentiment, c'est que je me sens un peu étranger au débat qu'il y a là, parce que tout ce qui se passe au Moyen-Orient, un ensemble géographique et politique auquel la Turquie est associée, on parle du monde arabe aussi, et les pays du Golfe, nous est étranger à nous au Maghreb. Nous avons un autre regard qui est désaxé, et je reviens à ce que je disais dans ma première intervention, qui est tourné plutôt vers l'Europe et particulièrement vers la France. Mais aujourd'hui, l'Europe et la France vivent une crise économique et financière comme on n'en a jamais vécu depuis 1929. Le Maghreb intéresse peu ou pas, et on se tourne vers d'autres acteurs, et c'est ce que je disais tout à l'heure, la raison pour laquelle le Qatar aujourd'hui est sans doute plus utile, plus important, plus intéressant que ne l'est le Maghreb. Même si ce lien tissé pendant plus d'un siècle restera à exister compte tenu de la population qui vit notamment en France.
Thank you very much. Just one point. I think you said history is written by the loser, but it is written by les vainqueurs. Yeah, I think you said par les vaincus, mais c'est par les vainqueurs. Very interesting point, and I think that leads me perfectly to my next topic. You didn't know that, but that does. I think Özlem has something to add to this conversation, or can we move on, and then you can tell me what you want to say. Can we move on? You can, okay, if it's something relating to this, go ahead, say it now. Yes.
Not to this one, but the previous one.
Sure,
Okay,
yes,
for
go
the
ahead.
GCC.
Sure,
I just wanted to remind that it was in 2009, it has been decided for in the GCC summit to actually create a common defense system. So even though this didn't happen yet, it is a quite good intention for the GCC to act together. That's my
Sure.
point to just
Great. Okay, we have questions in the audience. That's awesome. How do we get microphones to? Let's start with the lady in the second row, and then there is a gentleman back in the fourth row back there. Lady, yes. Please introduce yourself so we know who you are, your affiliation, if possible, and your question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Lisette Mermot. I'm one of the speakers at the conference, and I'd like to pose the question about financial services. This is an area which is geographic and spans all of the Maghreb, the GCC, and Turkey. There are now new poles of financial services centers. They are competing. Turkey with the International Financial City project at the moment. Bahrain, which has a traditional historical role of being the financial service center for the region there. And obviously the new CFC, or Casablanca Finance City project, planned here for Morocco. May I ask the panelists, where do you see the role of banking and finance, number one, as competition among the regions and the benefits of competition to grow economically? And two, a separate question, what do you think the relationship between Turkey and the GCCs will do to build entrepreneurship? Where the fact of the matter is, among the 15 countries, from Kuwait all the way to Morocco, there are only 5,227 enterprises registered as legal entities. And how can you make that grow? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to please choose a panelist to answer your question. If you have a choice, otherwise we'll let them volunteer. Let them volunteer? Okay, who wants to volunteer for this? Okay, let's go with Abdullah and then come back to you, Mohammed. And then let's have the microphone ready at the fourth row back there, the gentleman. Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Anybody here? I'm not seeing. Okay, then back there. Okay. And then we might come back to you. I'll let you know in a second. Thank you.
Well, talking about financial services in the Gulf, I would speak about Bahrain, obviously. As we all know, Islamic finance started in Bahrain 1 year before Singapore. There are more than 400 banks and financial institutions operating in Bahrain. And only 10 of those are Turkish banks. Whereas we know that the most significant area of investment, or Turkish investments in the Gulf, are construction. For example, in Saudi Arabia, more than 500 companies have been operating alone in Saudi Arabia in 2012. I can see that area developing more in Bahrain and Dubai because of the legal infrastructure, I would say. In Bahrain, it has been in place for decades. The legislations put by the Bahraini Central Bank, obviously, is an asset of attracting new financial services in the region. And in Dubai, I would say the DIFC, which would have their own legislations and regulations. Thank you.
Mehmet, briefly, if you can, so we can get more
Yes,
questions.
Briefly, because I'd like to use my right to speak on energy and geopolitical realignment.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So on the financial services, I mean, wherever you look, from Shanghai all the way to Frankfurt and New York, every country wants to build their own regional financial center. I've been involved in the one in Astana, in Kazakhstan, and there's one in Moscow, and Baku is trying to do the same thing. I think, of course, Dubai and Bahrain are very important. Now Casablanca, we hear. There are some prerequisites for becoming viable financial services centers. One is, of course, you have to have the right physical infrastructure, plus communications, transportation, whatever needed. Secondly, legal and institutional framework that should assure the investors and flows. And then stability. Sorry? Well, I'm coming to that. Then you should also have political and economic stability so that investors will trust that their funds are. Because one of the reasons why Turkey received so much sovereign wealth funds from Russia, from Central Asia, from China, from Gulf region is that after the 2008 financial crisis, there was a confidence crisis as well. So countries or the holders of this funds wanted to be sure that their funds will be in safe places also with high rates of return. Therefore, these prerequisites are very important to have in order to call a real financial center. Entrepreneurship, yes, I think Turkey is not poor in this regard, and huge entrepreneurial power. When you go to Istanbul, Bursa, you will see that. And they are trying to use this in terms of technical assistance in Africa and certain parts of Middle East. Much could be done, of course, but the work has started through Turkish International Cooperation Agency, TICA.
Great, thank you very much. The question.
Thank you very much. I'm Fundanga from Zambia. I'm one of the speakers tomorrow on the financial inclusion issue. Now, I I've been listening, and each time I've been asking myself, what exactly are we looking for in leadership in the Gulf states and in Turkey? I've not had that question answered. In my view, clearly something has happened in the region. And I think that most of the countries that were negatively affected by the Arab Spring probably will be struggling to play a leadership role. So you have to see what happened in those countries where they did not have problems and what can we expect of them going forward. I've had a long association with Egypt myself. I just come from Tunisia before coming here and so forth. Tunisia was vibrant. It's now completely down. Even the tourism, you can see nobody even sleeps in the hotels. So that is out. It's the same problem with Egypt. Egypt used to be a mighty military power, but it's no longer. But looking within the Middle East, I think Middle East has got a strategic location globally. It is the middle of the world. And I think this has been ably demonstrated by United Arab Emirates, especially Dubai. I'm surprised that very little has been said about Dubai, because in our world, everybody's talking of Dubai. Even to get here, you have to go through Dubai. Yet, a few years back, I remember in 1998, when I first passed through Dubai airport, not international airport then. It was just a little airport, but it has grown. And you can also see that within the United Arab Emirates, there is competition. Each Emirate is also trying to position itself. Dubai now is a global center for finance. Most of our banks now are regionally run from there. It's a logistical center. I belong to Red Cross. Even when we are looking for ambulances, you can easily source them from there. So it's something about commercial policy that leaders are going to adopt that will help countries position themselves as leaders within this region, especially after the Arab Spring. I don't know where Morocco falls. It was not negatively affected, but again, we haven't said much about whether Morocco can also be part of, but we have got a lot of Moroccans here. So during my short stay here, I hope that we can discuss more about what can be done or what we can expect from those countries that are still standing on their feet after the Arab Spring. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. These are very important points that we will be raising with the panelists. Can we get the question here on this side, please, all the way in the back? And I'm right here. He's standing up. He's standing up right there. Mm-hmm. And I will come back to you later, okay? Not on this round. We need to finish this. Yes, go ahead.
Well, first I would like to thank our dear panelists for their rich interventions. Then I introduce myself. My name is Musaf Akrim. I'm a postgraduate marketing student. Well, in reference to the issue of the deterioration of the zero conflict strategy adopted by the Turkish government and as stated by Mrs. Nasser and Mr. Harb, I would like to ask just my question to Mrs. Pitlanoglu. Mrs. Pitlanoglu, would you please tell us what is really going with the zero conflict strategy? Is it that the Turkish government is deliberately renouncing and abandoning such a strategy? Is it that the regional circumstances are dictating such a change of position, or maybe is it that the Turkish government is still hanging on to the zero conflict strategy in the perspective of sacrificing their relations with some governments in favor of maintaining good relations with their people? For instance, the case of Syria. Thank you.
Go ahead, Özlem.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. As a member of AK Party, I could tell you that Mr. Erdogan, when he launched the zero problem policy with neighborhood, is welcomed by everyone, I mean, internally and externally. And it helped a lot for a while to us to actually have good trade relations and good economic and political relations. For example, we tried to actually open borders between Armenia and Turkey, which actually closed due to the Armenians' occupation in 5 rayons in Azerbaijan. Also, our relations with Syria was very bad, and we later on, by this policy, we actually uplift the visa requirements, and we in one day we had, I remember, just 25 agreements. And when it comes to Greece, for example, we do have a minority issues. I mean, the issues about minority rights in Turkey and in Greece, Turkish-rooted people in Greece, and we started talking to them. So these are the actually good intentions and policies that drive us to a better position. And for example, Iran is the 14th importer of Turkish goods, and also we have high dependency to Iran for the natural gas and oil reserves. And also Iran sits between Turkey and Turkmenistan, which is actually the second biggest provider for us to gas. So this is a picture that we actually first started. Our intention is very clear, but what happened is not actually driven from us, but the conjecture itself. For example, we didn't start the uprising in Syria. Did we? No, but we have to defend our borders first. We need to somehow secure our borders. We don't want to let people die those places. And even in Turkey, right, in two gates, we lost 5 people and 51 people in Ceylanpınar because of the Syrian uprisings and civil war. So we shouldn't put Turkey in a position that Turkey started the whole flames and make the region unsteady. That is not right. And Turkey, I would like to once again underline that doesn't want to be, a leader and come up with a stage that we're the leader of the region. No, we say that at the end of the 19th century, the whole region, Middle East region, borders was actually drawn by Western societies and states. But now the multipolar world is giving us new leadership. United States there, Russia, China, Iran, and what about Middle East? So now the question is, who's going to actually leading power or powers in Middle East? And what I can tell is that Turkey is an important player in the region, and I believe that within GCC, it seems Saudi Arabia is taking leadership. Thank you.
This is wonderful. I want to go to the topic before we run out of time. The topic of energy and oil and gas. And, Qadir said it in a very interesting way. I really appreciate how you put it. It's like if you don't have oil or gas, you're really not interesting these days. It's as simple as that. It's a harsh reality. It's tough, but this is how it looks, at least from his perspective and many other people's perspective. Also, the idea of leadership. And I think Muwafaq mentioned it already, that there is a leadership crisis. And I think the more we talk about it, we realize that there is a leadership crisis in the entire region. But I personally see it as a positive because without this crisis, we will never be able to define the future. If we live like everything is fine, everything is dandy and okay, and we pretend like everything is all right, we will never move forward. So on this topic, I want you to, not just a quick comment, I'm going to throw it to you to make your comment, but also let's start this conversation about what makes those leaders these days. Are we talking about energy and oil and gas and power? Where is that power coming from?
This is exactly
Yes.
my comment going to be.
Go ahead.
I think leadership is not something that a president or a leader of a country can claim and you have it. Leadership is, what do you have to offer? If you have to offer something that the other in the region are looking for and aspiring for, then you are a leader. And as you said, it's a positive thing that you don't have leadership. However, I think we have to make the distinction between leading and dominating. It's a good thing we don't have any dominant force, but yes, we need leadership. The Arab world is feeling the vacuum of Egypt being sidelined right now. You need a cultural leadership. I'm not talking about military leadership. But again, what will decide whether a country has a role to play is what this country has to offer. The Middle East and mainly the Arab world are looking for stability, economic growth, and a model of governance that they are struggling to come up with, and they keep searching for, and definitely nothing is working so far. You need something to come like an indigenous solution. And if Turkey can help in this regard, automatically it will have a leadership role. If Iran can do that, which is trying to do, but obviously it's not working, because the system of governance they are recommending, it will not work. It's not working in Iran, according to a large number of Iranians. It's not going to work in the Arab world. So you need to come up with an indigenous solution to the world, to the Arab world issues.
So the question is really what makes leadership? What is going to make it? I mean, what is the race about in the region these days? Anybody can tell me? Is it an energy race? Can
it's a nuclear race. It's energy. It's nuclear.
It's nuclear.
Sure.
It's energy. Let's talk about it. I mean, let's not dance around it. Let's talk about it. Abdullah.
Well, I agree that if yesterday and today you don't have energy and oil, you're not interesting. But tomorrow it would be if you don't have water and food, you're not interesting. As we know, in Turkey, there's the largest spring water reserves in the region. And we all remember the Pipelines for Peace initiative of Turkey, or Anabib al-Salam. It was basically an initiative to build freshwater pipelines from Turkey to the Gulf states. As I said earlier, the agriculture accumulates 9% of the total GDP of Turkey. Food production is a main sector, and Turkey is developing in that area. With regards to energy or nuclear energy, Turkey, I think, is playing a major role in preserving the region and in its joint desire with the Gulf states to have a nuclear-free region. Obviously, we all remember the joint Brazilian Turkish initiative on the days of the former Brazilian president, Mr. Lula da Silva, which was obviously sabotaged for some reasons. But we can see Turkey playing a bigger role in the region.
Well, okay, let's go to Mohammed in this case. This is your specialty, and or one of your specialties, I should say. But, you know, I don't think a nuclear-free zone is in anybody's agenda. It looks like more countries are racing to have their own reactors. Of course, we're talking about clean energy. We're talking about nothing negative, but a lot of positivity in it. But there is a race for that. I understand the UAE is about to open a nuclear reactor in 2017 or something like that. You know a lot about that. You're involved in a lot of research about this. Tell us where we're headed, and tell us, is this what's going to define the modern leaders of the region, energy?
Thank you. I think one thing that is very clear is that in this simultaneous changing environment, you can't run the countries and the region with the existing leadership. So leadership has to change, and it will. And we are going to have very serious political succession problems in the region. It already started. So what will happen in GCC after King Abdullah in Saudi Arabia, and then, of course, Assad, we know, and other monarchies. And in Egypt, we saw that, what was happening. In Iran, we had a change of political leadership, which opened new avenues now for it. So the new era requires new leadership. And it will come, whether you like it or not. And when it comes to energy, I think we have to be aware of the fact that there are very, very significant changes in world's energy, let alone the region. Of course, region is very important. We used to say that the Gulf region has 2/3 of the world's oil reserves. This is no longer so. So you have new supply regions, which will be competing very, very harshly and tough with the Gulf region. The Arctic region is opening up now as a result of climate change. A third of the world's oil and gas lies there. US shale gas changed the game. US now is on the way to become energy independent, currently about, I think, 85, 86%. And shale gas will improve US competitiveness and also its geopolitical involvement in different regions, including in the Gulf. Whatever they say to the contrary, it is going to happen. China is hungry for energy. And by 2030, we expect China to import around 13 million barrels per day of oil. That means more than Saudi production today. And as a result, we see that Chinese presence in the Gulf is every passing day increasing. So China will be importing almost 80% of its energy needs. And there's also a discussion whether the US security umbrella provided so far will change. So whether Chinese Navy, PLA Navy, will be patrolling the Strait of Hormuz and the Malacca Strait. So these are going to create serious tensions. It's not going to be peaceful and easy. Then you have, of course, Iran coming to the picture. And Iraq, currently 2.5 million barrels per day. If they achieve what they target by 2030, almost 8.5 million barrels per day, then Iran getting into the picture, increasing its oil exports, sanctioned for a long time, this might even shatter OPEC altogether. So the region has to prepare for the emergencies that are going to come. It's not going to be peaceful and easy. It's going to be painful. Because as a result, of course, there's a recognition of that. Nuclear power plants are now mushrooming. I don't think that the nuclear renaissance in the world stopped. It stopped in the West. But east you go, all the emerging economies, powerful economies, are building new nuclear power plants, including United Arab Emirates, including Egypt planning to do it, and Turkey, of course, already started 2 nuclear power plants, and third is in the pipeline. And also we have to bear in mind that this region, MENA and Gulf, are no longer a supply province of the world. They are becoming an important player on the world consumption map. And so Egypt used to export a great deal of LNG. Right now they are importing LNG from Qatar and elsewhere. And Saudi Arabia, Chatham House had a paper a couple of months ago, predicted that by 2050, if the current consumption pattern of Saudi Arabia continues, they will start perhaps importing crude oil. So these are very significant changes, game changers in their economies, hydrocarbon economies especially, and geopolitically, it is leading to realignment. US dependence on the Gulf oil is around 10%, 10-12%, and it was about 23-25% in 2000. So it is coming down. Europe, don't mention Europe. It doesn't exist in the region. It doesn't have much influence, although it's an economic giant, but politically it's a dwarf, as we know. So India is coming in a very strong way to the Gulf as well. Therefore, I believe that this new configuration of energy on the supply, demand side, investment side, as well as geopolitical realignment, will require very strong, smart leadership in the region to handle, to address the risks as well as capture the opportunities.
I think the more we talk, the more I get depressed. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to find that leadership. Can we take that question in the back? Where's that gentleman who had a question? Yeah, let's hear you, and then we're going to do our quick final remarks, okay?
Hassan Fnin, de la grande école de commerce de Marrakech, JEC Marrakech. Certainement, la Turquie a quelque chose à proposer dans la région. Certainement, la Turquie est dans une vision expansionniste. Elle en a les moyens parce que c'est un pays qui a pris tout le temps, presque 70 ans, pour revoir sa position dans la région. Aujourd'hui, ils en ont les moyens. Ma question s'adresse aux représentants turcs.
Nous avons deux.
Oui, les deux représentants.
Ah, les deux, non, choisis.
Entre domination et leadership, quel est le choix réel aujourd'hui de la Turquie? Est-ce qu'on fait en sorte d'éviter de refaire l'histoire de la Turquie, malheureusement, qui n'a pas laissé de bons impacts au niveau de la région? Moi, je suis marocain, Nous sommes un des pays qui a le moins été impacté par l'Empire ottoman. Et donc, nous avons un contact et un souvenir peut-être le plus positif de la région. Qu'est-ce que vous faites pour ne pas profiter de la situation actuelle de la région, tous ces conflits-là, pour fonder une expansion peut-être positive pour la région MENA? Merci.
All right, one last question, right there, the gentleman in the glasses. Yes. Anybody on this side had a question? I don't want to be missing you guys. Oh, you're good. Okay. Last question, yes.
Bonsoir, Jamal Amiar, journalist. I will ask my question is in English, as most of the speakers are English speaking. The concept of soft power has not at all been mentioned. So my question is very simple. Can you be a regional leader, whether you are Turkey or an Arab GCC country, if you don't have any kind of soft power, summarizing it to the fact of being inspiring for others? Thank you.
That's a great question to end on. And the Turkish question you got, so if you can include it in your remarks. Let's keep it brief. Let's keep it positive, if we can, because I am really depressed after this panel. I'm not too optimistic about where we're headed, but let's try to end it on the positive note. What can be done to make it all positive? Should we start with you, Qadir?
Ok, je vais suivre votre injonction d'être positif. Ce qui est positif, c'est qu'on voit que depuis presque 3 ans maintenant, les peuples ont réintégré l'histoire puisqu'ils ont décidé de reprendre la parole. Ça a commencé en Tunisie et on connaît ensuite. Donc, je pense que c'est peut-être là-dessus qu'il faut miser. Et moi qui suis à cheval sur les 2 pays, Algérie-Maroc, dans lesquels j'ai des liens familiaux, je crois qu'il y a quelque chose, une grande idée qui avait germé dans l'esprit de nos grands-pères et qui n'a jamais pu être trouvée de prolongement politique ou être mise en application, qui est le Maghreb. Aujourd'hui, la réalité à la fois économique, stratégique et politique et la constitution d'ensemble fort, autant que faire harmonieux et si possible unis. Donc si on ne va pas vers ce genre d'objectif, évidemment le Maghreb, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, continuera à être vraiment peanuts, quelque chose qui ne compte pas ni pour la Turquie, ni pour le Golfe et encore moins pour les Occidentaux. Donc pour finir, ma vision positive, la perspective pour nous c'est celle-là. À un moment ou à un autre, cette réalité nous rattrapera toujours, quels que soient les problèmes, quelles que soient les difficultés. Et je crois que ça doit commencer par la prise de conscience des peuples, notamment de cette jeunesse, qui, elle, peut imposer cette réalité à nos dirigeants politiques. Merci.
Yes, I think a couple of quick points I want to make. One is that Turkey has made its choice. It wants to become part of the global system and engage with every region. MENA, Gulf is just one of them. Turkey's, I think, integration with the European Union is still an overriding political objective. Turkey has engaged in a very strong way with its historical enemy, 13 times fought, with Russia. We have now win-win, mutually beneficially rewarding relationship with Russia. We engage with China now. It has become our almost 2nd or 3rd largest trading partner, with Asia Pacific, with South Asia, Central Asia, Caspian. So Middle East and North Africa and Gulf region is just one of them. And because Turkey turned its back to this region historically, it's now reawakening and reopening the doors. Therefore, I wouldn't agree calling this new approach as an expansionist vision. It is not. I think Turkey has lost a lot in this region. We are just hosting now 800,000 Syrians, not in the camps, but in the cities of Turkey, 800,000. This is the population of a country in the Gulf. And also our trade disrupted, Turkish investment in the region, seriously damaged. But we still continue our engagement because we believe that, on the positive side, the young generations of this region, they have aspirations for prosperity, for democracy, freedoms. I think they will have a great deal of renaissance and similarity in their generation in Turkey. So I think it's not going to be an easy process. It will take time. But I think at the level of leadership, with the political succession stories being successful, and the new generation, there will be greater mutually beneficial engagement. So I really like what Harp said in the beginning. The last uprising in the Arab world was against the Ottomans in 1916. So now Turkey is taking sides somehow with those who are pro-democracy, free market, and more human rights approach.
I'm going to go to Abdullah and then come this way to you, Özlem. I'll let you close us today.
Well, I still believe that the strategic partnership between the Gulf states and Turkey has an enormous potential to resolve and address almost all of the issues in the region. Given the political and economic stability in both the Gulf states and Turkey, more can be done, I believe, through more comprehensive dialogue, building up even more broader action plans. We've seen the recent one put forward by the Gulf states and Turkey a couple of months ago, the 2013 to 15 action plan. If we get a chance to look at it, it's quite broad on several issues. And working more closely on developing policies, solutions, initiatives. And I truly believe that this partnership could flourish and develop. Thank you, Oktay.
Muwaffaq, and can you please touch on the soft power idea as well, so we
sure.
can answer that question?
Sure. Talking about soft powers, you know, Turkey is very good in soft powers right now. If you turn on Arab TV networks, you see a lot of Turkish drama.
Soap operas, right?
Soap operas.
That's right. Yeah, they're very popular.
In Lebanon, we don't have shortage of that. Definitely soft power that at one point was led by Egypt in the Arab world, and to some extent Lebanon. Right now, Turkey is a major player. I would like to conclude by, you know, if I heard and I understood Mohammed correctly in what my friend Abdullah just said, can you separate between economic interests and values that Mohammed talked about, that Turkey is now pursuing? Could you have a good relationship and a close relationship with the rest of the Arab world if you pursue human rights and democracy agenda? So is that in contradiction with what Abdullah just said? I conclude with one thing, which is to avoid being depressed, Octavia, you have to manage expectations. Let's not be romantic. Let's try to find some realistic solution to the problems of the Arab world. Let's try to make them locally made, and see if you instead of maybe the word democracy has been slaughtered and misused in the Arab world, maybe we can hope for more representative system of government before we can go to democracy.
Great point. Özlem.
Thank you. We talked about energy issues, and in Turkey we don't have any oil, no energy, but we can actually offer so many things to the region and to the world. And the first one is that even though here some panelists define, for example, AK Party as an Islamist party, which I don't agree, because we never defined ourselves as that. We always call...
Actually, I was even surprised when you said you're an...
conservative Democrat rather than Islamist.
Right.
We offer that with the majority of population is Sunni, can have a very mature democracy. That will be my last words. And it is, of course, nice to hear from Moroccan that they missed the Ottoman, period and these things. That this is nice, but it's an inspiration which actually doesn't driven from Turkey itself. I mean, maybe individually some people want to see Turkey as in that position, but we do like actually our gains, which actually come from our Republic of Turkey. Thank you.
I want to thank the panelists for a wonderful, wonderful panel, I think. I want to thank you, the audience. You've been great. I hope that we were able to stimulate you a little bit. If I am to, I'm going to take Muwaffaq's advice and not be romantic and manage the expectations, but at the same time, my great hopes for you, the young people, especially the very young people in the audience, the students. I personally, and I know this panel, everyone on this panel, we have high hopes for you because the future is in your hands. So we can talk, we can give you our perspectives and share our expertise, but it's up to you to change the world. And we hope that you change it for the better, and I still have that hope. So if that's romantic, then, you know, it's hopeless with me. I do want this region to thrive. I think we all do, and each one of us, and you too, we have our vision for how we can bring change. I thank you for being a great audience. I really look forward to staying in touch with all of you and following you, and I wish you the best of luck in changing this world. Hopefully we helped just a little bit today. Thank you very much.